District in Akron. I would like to thank you all for coming today to participate in the press conference relating modernizing Ohio's domestic violence laws. I just want to let you know that my co-sponsor and I are not in our optimal physical condition, so that means that we will not be here for very long, but we do want to make sure that we share very important information with you. At the beginning of my term, I was interviewed by one of the State House news reporters, and they asked me if I had any legislation in mind that I wanted to introduce as a first-year legislator. I had the exact answer. I wanted to introduce legislation that would close a loophole in Ohio's domestic violence law and protect all victims of intimate partner violence. That includes family and household members as we know it, and it also includes victims in dating relationships. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention defines intimate partner violence as physical violence, sexual violence, stalking, and psychological aggression by a current or former intimate partner. The CDC further defines an intimate partner as a current or former spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, or dating partner. Estimates from the CDC suggest that nearly 25% of women will be a victim at some point in their lifetime. And while men can be victims of intimate partner violence, women are overwhelmingly the majority of victims. And you'll often hear advocates and throughout this press conference, women as the victims. Well, intimate partner violence can happen to anyone, married, engaged, dating, and this is regardless of their occupation, age, race, or social class. Ohio's definition of domestic violence differs from that from the CDC because it does not include all victims of intimate partner violence. Current law protects spouses, family and household members, cohabitants, people living as spouses, and persons who have a child in common. This leaves people who are in substantial, ongoing, intimate, and romantic relationships out of protections that they should also be afforded to them for their personal well-being and safety. For that reason, Representative Kuhns and I are introducing a bill that will close the loophole and modernize Ohio's domestic violence laws to include protections for individuals in dating relationships. Since I started circulating this idea and some bill drafts, I've received many questions about it, and I've had to dispel a few myths about dating violence. So I'm going to get to just a few of them today. The first issue was defining what dating violence is. Quite frankly, a lot of people have a lot of different ideas about what that means. And so that can present some difficulty in trying to legislate this issue. Fortunately, or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, Ohio does not have to look very far in determining how to define dating violence because 48 other states have already taken the steps to include intimate partner violence, dating violence specifically, in their domestic violence laws. That's right, Ohio is only one of 2 states in the country who have not updated their criminal or civil laws to protect all intimate partner violence victims. Second, many people believe that dating only involves teenagers or college students, and these are just fleeting relationships that they have here and there. And while teenagers and college students unfortunately do report violence in their relationships, they are not the only population of quote-unquote daters. A study by Bowling Green State University showed that the marriage rate between 1920 and current times has significantly declined, and since the 1980s, we have seen a substantial decrease in marriage rates. Additionally, people are waiting longer to get married, with the age of 27 being the average age of marriage, which is the highest in over a century. But despite not being married, these people are engaged in substantial, ongoing, intimate, and romantic relationships that could and do result in violence, but they're not always protected under the law. And while marriage has declined, intimate partner violence has not. Additionally, other adults who have been married or divorced and choose not to remarry are also dating, and these relationships deserve protection as well because they too can be prone to violence. Finally, there's an issue of cohabiting. It's one of the things that people tend to say is the catch-all for people who aren't necessarily married. And while cohabitation happens, not everyone decides that is right for their relationship. Nonetheless, they still deserve the protection. The Ohio Supreme Court offers some help to us in showing that domestic violence protection should also protect individuals in dating relationships. In the case State versus Williams, the court was tasked with the challenge under the domestic violence laws, entirely under the cohabitation distinction. Now, we're not discussing that today, but the case does provide some valuable insight about what we can do in the state of Ohio around dating violence. The court ultimately held, quote, the offense of domestic violence arises out of the relationship of the parties rather than their exact address. The court went on to cite several social science articles centered on domestic violence, stating, quote, in contrast to stranger violence, domestic violence arises out of the relationship between the perpetrator and the victim. Social science studies show that the rate of violence in dating relationships is at least the same as, if not greater, than of couples who maintain one address, end quote. Further, in a weekly column by Justice Pfeiffer in September 2014, discussing the issue of cohabitation and the Williams progeny of cases, Justice Pfeiffer states, quote, in Williams, by determining that the offense of domestic violence arises out of the relationship of the parties rather than their exact living circumstances, we interpreted the law broadly to include those who did not live with the offender, but who also deserve protection under the law based on their relationship with the offender. And that sums up why Representative Kuhns and I are introducing our bill that will allow victims of dating violence to obtain civil protection orders under the domestic violence statutes. It is pretty clear that the intent of the General Assembly in enacting the original domestic violence laws was to protect victims of domestic violence based on the relationships, not on their titles and not on their living arrangements. With that, I will now turn it over to Representative Kuhns.